Today we're going to be talking about section 4.2, congruent figures. Two geometric figures are congruent if they have exactly the same size and shape. Okay, so if we were to take this image right here, okay, here's our polygon. If we were to place it on top of this polygon, it would be the same exact, they would fit perfectly on top of each other because they're congruent. They have the exact same size and the exact same shape. Okay, so in two congruent figures, all the parts of one figure are congruent to the corresponding parts of the other figure. So when we talk about that the corresponding parts are congruent, we mean that the corresponding sides and the corresponding angles are all congruent. So here in this figure, we see that these arcs that we have just show that this angle F is congruent to angle O, okay? And this angle G has two arcs, so that must be congruent to this angle N because it has two arcs as well. Okay, same for H and M and P and E. So here in this figure, we're denoting that these figures are congruent by their angles. So the way that we would write our congruent statement would be F, G, H, E is congruent to O, N, M, P. Let me rewrite this real quick. Okay, so notice when we wrote this that here angle F came first. Okay, angle F has one arc. So therefore, when we write this other corresponding figure, we have to write angle O first. Okay, angle O and angle F are congruent. Same goes for G. Okay, G has two arcs. So our next letter should be N because N has two arcs as well. Okay, same goes for H. H has three arcs, M has three arcs. Okay, so the order in which you write your congruent statement matters. When you write your letters, they should correlate with the congruent angle that goes with it. So E is our last letter. This has four arcs. Our last letter in our other figure should be P because P has four arcs as well. This is not the only way that we could have wrote this congruent statement. You could have also done it another way. You could have said, I don't know, you could have started with G first. Okay, well G has two arcs. So when I write this congruent statement, I had to start with the other one that has two arcs. Okay, these angles are congruent. So you have to match up your congruent vertices. Okay, then I could say H. Okay, H is congruent to M. So M would be my next letter. Then I could say E. E is congruent to P. And then my last letter would be F, which is congruent to O. So you do not have to stick, there's no set way to write these congruent statements. The only rule is you must match up congruent angles or congruent sides. Okay, part B. If the measure of angle E equals 2x plus 7 and the measure of angle P equals 8x minus 11, then x equals blank. Okay, take notice real quick. We kind of talked about this last unit that we have the measure of angle E and the measure of angle P. Remember that when we're talking about measures, okay, we're talking about equality. If we're just talking about the angles, then we're talking about congruency. Okay, we need to remember that there is a difference between the two. So if I'm going to solve for this, I see that in my picture, E and P are both congruent. You can also look at it from your congruent statement. E and P are both the third letter in your congruent statement. So you know that these two angles must be congruent or equal. If they're equal, I can set them equal to each other and solve for x. Okay, when you solve for x, you should get x equals 3. Okay, when you're doing algebra, you should always check. In order to check if you got the right answer, you can take your value that you got for x and plug it back in. So if I plug it back into angle E, Okay, I get 13. And if I plug x back into angle P, I get 13 as well. So I know that I did my algebra right. Next, we're going to talk about congruent triangles. Congruent triangles have 3 congruent angles and 3 congruent sides. So in this picture, okay, so here in this picture, this hash mark right here just tells us that this side is congruent to this side. They both have 1 hash mark. Okay? 2 hash marks just tells us that this side is congruent to this side because they have 2 hash marks. And same goes for here. 3 hash marks and 3 hash marks. Now let's start with labeling our triangle. Here I'm going to label this triangle as triangle CAT. Okay? Now I had to make sure that I label this triangle the same, okay? So as in regards to the vertices that I used. Well, first I got to figure out which angles are congruent to each other. So here I'm given that angle C is 46 degrees, angle T is 70, angle D is 46, and angle G is 64. So if this angle is 46 and this angle is 70, this means that my angle A has to be 64 degrees because there's 180 degrees in a triangle. Okay? If I look at this triangle, here I have 46 degrees, 64. What's left over is 70 degrees. Okay, so now I know that angle C is congruent to angle D, angle A is congruent to angle G, and angle T is congruent to angle O. So now I can write my triangle. Okay, so this is going to be triangle D. Okay, C and D are congruent. A is congruent to G, and T is congruent to O. Okay, so that's how I'm going to write my triangle. Oh, that's supposed to be an O. Okay, so I just said that C is congruent to D, A is congruent to G, and T is congruent to O. Now let's look at our sides. CA is congruent to DG. Now be careful. If you wrote this as GD, you would be incorrect, okay? When we said CA, we started with C and we went to A, okay? We started at 46 degree angle and went to our 64 degree angle. Okay, here we're starting at our 46 degree angle and we're ending at our 64 degree angle. So you have to make sure you're staying consistent. Okay, so angle AT, okay, would be G congruent to angle or line GO. CT is congruent to line DO. Okay, again, be careful. Here we started with C and we went towards T. We started at this angle 46 and we went towards our 70 degree angle. So we had to do the same on this side. Okay, so this is kind of just a recap of what we just talked about. Which side is included between angle A and angle T? Well, that's going to be side AT, okay? So that you can label that as, AT. Which side is between angles A and C? Well, that's going to be side AC. Now notice how I wrote this line, okay? We're starting with angle A and we're ending with angle C. So when I write it, I'm going to start with angle A and I'm going to end with angle C. Okay? Same goes for this last one. Which side is included between angle T and angle C? I'm going to start with T and end with C, and I'm going to write my line. Okay. Which angle now is between sides CA then side AT. Okay, that's going to be angle A. Okay, you can also know that because both of these include an A. So you know that if they both include an A, then the angle that is included between them is going to be A. Now let's look at CA and CT. The included angle is going to be angle C. Here, if you don't want to look at the picture and you just want to look at what our lines are labeled as, you know that C is going to be the included angle because they both have a C. Okay? And the last one. If we look at line CT and line AT, our included angle is going to be angle T. And you know that this is an included angle, not even by looking at the picture, because they both include AT. So this is going to be angle T. Okay, in the next video, we're going to talk about triangle congruence theorems.